Welcome to the Church Vibes Podcast with Jordan and Maddie, the podcast where we talk about all things Christian, all things culture, and all things Christian culture. This is a space where we love having tough conversations. It's our hope that whether you're a dedicated follower of Christ, you've never stepped foot in a church or opened a Bible in your life, or you're anywhere in between, you'll be able to learn something new, think about something differently, or be encouraged in some small way. Now, on to the show.
What's up, you guys? Jordan here.
Grace and peace, everybody. It's Maddie, and welcome to episode 7 of the Church Vibes Podcast.
This is a special episode because, as you know, 7 is the holiest number.
Absolutely. So this means this is going to be our holiest podcast.
So we can't even joke. We need to just jump right into the episode.
Yeah,
what do we got?
Well, we're coming in hard. I wanted to actually say that listener discretion is advised for this first trending topic. We're not going to be sharing any graphic details, but the material being discussed is of a sensitive nature. So if little ears are in range, you might consider putting in your headphones, going to another room, listening later, or even skipping ahead a few minutes into the episode. We're going to be discussing the controversial film just reversed on Netflix, Cuties. Cuties is a French independent film that follows the journey of a Muslim French-Senegalese 11-year-old who joins a sexually suggestive twerking clique in her neighborhood. According to the makers of the film, Cuties is intended to be a social commentary on the hypersexualization of pre-adolescence. But this film has caused a complete uproar because of its graphic depictions of sexual behaviors, gestures, and conversations, all involving minors. There's now a movement of people sharing the hashtag #CancelNetflix, along with photos of their confirmation emails for canceling their subscriptions to the streaming service.
Man, there's a lot there. First of all, how desensitized have we become as just a nation, as a people or whatever, that we even thought to just, well, this is a good idea, right? Let's just make this movie. But I was actually talking to Tom the other day, since I've been up here.
Remember him from episode 5.
Yes, or 6 actually. Oh yeah, remember him from episode 5. Mm-hmm. Remember the surprise from episode 6 about me being up here. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we'll get to that later. But I really think that, okay, yes, there is an issue here, and there's topics that it touched on that were productive. But we didn't need to make a feature film of it, because when we make a movie, we have to dramatize things, right? We have to, the nature of film, you sometimes you dramatize, you do things a little over the top to prove your point. And this is definitely not something that you should be dramatizing or pushing or really taking at face value and recreating for the screen. I could see, it wouldn't have got nearly as many views, but a documentary maybe that talked about the issue would have been better off.
Absolutely. I completely agree that it shows how far we've come as a society, that this was even a movie that was considered to be put on a major streaming service, let alone actually put on that major streaming service. It's really unfortunate. I think that it brings up a good point, which is that there are a lot of issues in our society that need to be addressed. But I think that there are ways to address said issues without actually depicting them. There are ways to make a movie talking about the problem of the hypersexualization of pre-adolescent girls without actually filming pre-adolescent girls doing sexual gestures and having sexual conversations and dancing in a way that is sexually suggestive. By trying to make a movie about the hypersexualization of pre-adolescence, the producers hypersexualized pre-adolescents.
Yeah, and that's, since we did give that little warning in the beginning, I feel okay to say this. Let's change the topic we're going to talk, right? Let's change what the issue is. Let's make a movie about the dangers of pornography. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure no one in their right mind would think, okay, the best way to do it is to film a pornographic film. That's how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So if that's not okay, how is this okay?
Absolutely. My heart really goes out to... Yeah. I feel that the girls who acted in this film, I consider them victims because they're so young and they really don't fully understand what they've done and what they have gotten themselves into. And of course, for their parents to even allow them to do this is very frightening. Yeah,
and I've always thought it was weird when I watch a movie and a kid would cuss. Because I'm like, man, that actor had to learn a cuss word and then say it, right?
Yeah.
And so we're going farther, and we're like, again, like in trying to make a movie on this, we're teaching these kids exactly how to be the problem, right?
Yeah.
Or, not that they're the problem, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is hard, though, because I think that we've really created a society where this is viewed as okay by starting with the way that we put things on social media, with programs like Toddlers and Tiaras, where we're showing little kids in positions that may not necessarily be explicitly sexual, but where they do put them in compromising positions. And, you see people posting pictures of their kids on social media where the little kid isn't wearing pants, or you can see their little rear end or things like that. And that's always made me extremely uncomfortable, because I think about the people who are perverted, who are going to be able to see these things on social media, because social media is forever. And so to parents out there, really think about the images that you're posting of your children, because you have no idea who's going to end up being able to look at those. And that's what's going on with this film. People have said that this film is really kind of encourages pedophilia in a way. But even if you don't believe it encourages pedophilia, it is something that pedophiles would watch and would enjoy. And that is absolutely horrifying and vile and disgusting to think about. And so I completely understand the vitriolic reaction coming from people, especially parents, about the fact that Netflix put this movie out and seemingly has absolutely no plans to take the movie off of its lineup.
Yeah, and going back to like, sharing photos of your really little ones and all that, like, yes, we don't view it as any problem, but the reality is we live in a fallen world, and there are people out there that are, I'm not even going to get, I almost said a graphic word, I'm not even going to go there. Yeah. You get what I'm saying? And so that being said, you have to deal with the reality of the world is. And that's just what it is. And I'm with you on that. Like anywhere beyond like a infant, I feel like if you see a little infant butt in it, I mean.
Yeah. I mean, me personally, I feel uncomfortable in, because I just feel that, I mean, I'm one of those people, I'm not going to make a judgment on it either way, but I'm somebody that, when I have children in the future, probably won't put them on social media at all.
That's a good point, yeah.
Even, not in compromising positions, but probably wouldn't put them on social media at all, just because I don't want people seeing them and feeling inappropriately without them. And the reason that we don't think about those things is because a person who is normal and healthy would never in a million years look at a picture of a child and think anything except for, oh, what a cute kid. Right. Or, oh, that's something silly that the child is doing. So it is something that we should think about. But given that all of these people are doing this hashtag cancel Netflix thing, should we, as viewers, and particularly as Christian viewers, should we boycott Netflix? Should we join the hashtag cancel Netflix movement?
Yeah, and that was a big thing I was wrestling with earlier, because I saw some leaders that I look up to, and a lot of, respectable people canceling their subscription. And, first of all, I hate to say it, but do you think that Netflix really cares about, like, 0.1% of people unsubscribing? That's the unfortunate thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's about the money, right?
Yeah, but beyond that, like, as bad as this is, there are so many other atrocities in the world. And so is the right thing to do, is it always the right thing to just say cancel, to just cut it out? Because, and where I was wrestling was, I enjoy Netflix. There's a lot of good things. I mean, even just educational stuff on there is fantastic. And so am I doing enough good by simply cutting out the channel completely? Or should I do like I'm doing here, and now I'm talking about it? Yeah. And I'm bringing my opinion to awareness. It. But I can also then go and just knowingly not watch. What if we just don't watch it? And that's my other issue is I've seen a lot of Facebook posts of like, okay, guys, and these like white knights, right? Like, I watched it, and I'm here to report what I saw. I'm like, okay, great. But you watched it. Netflix they don't see why you watched it. They saw that you watched it.
And also, as a Christian, we have to guard our hearts, and we should not be bringing that stuff into our mind.
Right.
And that's something that I've struggled with, and you'll probably hear about this on the future in the podcast, is for my whole life, the biggest, I guess we'll say sin, it's not a sin to be curious, but the sin of really gluttony for knowledge, and gluttony for knowledge that I probably didn't need to have, in the sense that trying to watch things that I probably shouldn't have watched just because I'm like, well, I want to understand how such and such is portrayed. And especially as someone with a degree in media and mass communications, I'm fascinated by how that all works. And I want to see how this is portrayed. And I want to understand why people think that this is okay to watch. And I want to watch this so that I can comment on whether I think it's morally right or morally wrong. And there are a lot of things that I deeply regret watching, deeply regret listening to, because as a Christian, I don't need to put filth into my mind to know that it's filthy. I don't need, and so with this Cuties movie, there's no way I'm going to watch this movie. There's no way I'm going to watch this movie because I do not need to put images into my mind of children being objectified. I can know that it's wrong without having to do it. Kind of like how they say, you'll hear people say, I can know that smoking is unhealthy without trying it.
Right, yeah.
I think it's a similar situation.
And given the fact that we're all fallen people, why risk it? You know, I'm not saying that we're all secret pedophiles. I'm not. But, like, what if there is something in there that sparks some kind of interest in you? And you could go, this is an extreme.
Yeah, no,
you know,
God forbid.
But that's the reality, right? And so, you know, how about we speak against it and all that, but like, I feel like, and the other part about cancel culture, and I know this will be an episode soon. We keep mentioning it. It's coming. We
always keep, I think on pretty much every episode we've said, we're going to do an episode on cancel culture.
Yeah, soon we'll be canceled for not doing it, I'm sure. But, you know, I feel like with cancel culture, we get this big rush of dopamine by hitting that stop button or that unsubscribe button or whatever. And then we get that, like, that surge of feel good, like we did a good thing, and then we never think about it again. Is that really effective? Are we actually doing something positive by just hitting, you know, by taking away the $10 a month from one of the biggest companies in the world? Like,
well, it is something to think about. And in terms of, as Christians, what we should do, I think that in terms of boycotting Netflix, I'm going to say I do believe that is up to a matter of personal conviction. In terms of watching the movie, no Christian should be watching that movie, period. End of discussion. That's it. If you're a Christian, you do not watch this movie. But in terms of whether or not you should boycott Netflix, honestly, it seems silly, but I would encourage you to pray about it. Really, we should be asking the Lord about everything. We talked about this in our last episode, praying about every single little thing in your life. Pray and ask the Lord, how should I respond to this? Should I be boycotting this company? Or should I just not watch it and watch other content on Netflix? There are a lot of things within Christianity, because Christianity is based off of principles and not laws, where there may be something that God puts on your heart that the Holy Spirit convicts you of that he may not necessarily convict another person of. So I wouldn't want to speak and say for certain, yes, you need to boycott Netflix, or no, you should not boycott Netflix. I think, as with everything, go to God with it, ask him to lead and direct you, and we know that he's faithful to answer if we ask. So that would be my advice on that.
Definitely. Just, you know, realize that you will kill yourself trying to die on every single hill. If that, you know, that sounds a little funny just when I say it in words, but pray about the hills you're supposed to die on.
Absolutely.
And that's really it, right? It just goes back to prayer. But all that being said, we can put another disclaimer and say, I think we're done with the non-kid friendly stuff.
Yes.
Let's go into something a lot, like I really like the other thing we have here, because it is a total 180. Let's get into it, Maddie. What's the much better thing we have?
Yes, let's move on to something incredibly positive, a much more lighthearted topic. So on a completely and utterly different note, here's a piece of positive news for you today. A church in Chicago has recently paid off $19 million of medical debt for those in their community. Yes, $19 million. The church was able to raise $100,000 in order to buy $19 million of medical debt.
So first of all, it's like good to point out, because I didn't even think about this. how does 100,000 buy 19 million? It's because, like, you explained it, Maddie.
Yeah.
You said something better.
It's kind of weird because if let's say that you had some procedure done and it cost $100,000, you have to pay $100,000. But in a lot of cases, other people can go to the person that owns the debt and buy the debt for cheaper than what
like
the debt actually is.
Dollar, right?
Yeah, pennies on the dollar in a lot of cases. And so, I mean, you can see pennies on the dollar because it was $100,000 to buy $19 million of medical debt.
That's right.
Which I can't even imagine how big of a difference that was to the people in that community. You think about 19 million with an M. How much money is that? You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. You know, and really what I'm saying at the base line, whatever you want to say, this is really a loaves and fishes miracle in 2020.
Yeah, you know? I love that example.
And not only that, when you shared that article with me on the suggested reading, there's so many other ones of churches doing similar things.
Yes, this church in Chicago is not the only one, which is even more exciting than this news.
Yeah, and so, you know, like, my goodness, we really need to stop thinking about what we have or what we can do as insignificant. Yeah. Right? We just think like, well, I could never do that. That was like a mega church, or that was like, that church is 10,000 people. They all tied the dollar. You know what I mean? This should be, if this is not good enough proof, I don't know what is, that God can do a lot with a little.
Absolutely. And honestly, I mean, my first initial reaction is that it's great to see positive Christian news.
Yes.
We so often see stories about Christian leaders that fall. We talked about that on the podcast, about people that are suffering with immorality issues and infidelity and all these problems, Christians who were embezzling money, or Christians who are acting hypocritical or that aren't loving their neighbor the way that they should be. So it's so exciting to see positive things that Christians are doing in their communities being portrayed in the news. That's the first thing. Secondly, it kind of brings me to another side of this issue, which is what would happen in our churches and in our communities if we stopped putting God's money into the ground and put it into the people. If we stopped exclusively raising money for building funds and new wings to the church and redoing the ceiling and all of these things, and we started putting that money into the community. What would happen if we started going back to a more bivocational ministry model or a more lay ministry model, and we weren't having to pay several staff members a working wage? What could we do with that money in the community? Even small churches, how much medical debt could they buy? How many homes for people could they build? How many groceries could they buy? How many cribs and baby blankets and baby supplies could they buy? How many meals could they give out to the homeless?
Yeah. You know, and I'm seeing in 2020, corporations are realizing that they don't need a building, right? Like they, you know, and they're like, man, if I got rid of this, that's just this office space, I could hire X amount more people. And so, and this is rich coming from me because I'm big into, you know, big church productions, and I love that. I like big church and all that. But just go with me here for a minute and understand that I'm not all of a sudden changing my view on what I do.
He hasn't converted over to my side of things, unfortunately.
Maddie only has victories sometimes with me, guys. Like, I watched that movie, but, you know, but I digress. But what would happen if a big old church decided that, wow, we're really, really killing it online? What if we just shut the building down and allocate all that money to help our people in need? Like, and that's an extreme. I like to talk in extremes to prove that point. But, or what if we were like, we're going to go down to a tiny space for like Bible studies, and we will, you know what I mean? Like,
or what if we met in people's homes, or met in, you know,
which so many
things
do.
Like that. Yeah, met outside when the weather was appropriate. Things like that.
Yeah, you were a part of a church, and I visited that church that is very effective.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they made it home.
and still is today down in California.
And I'll tell you, they were not affected by all this COVID stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
That's the truth.
But it's just crazy, you know, like, you know, what, and I think obviously that's why we have mature Christian leaders, hopefully, running our churches, because there is a balance between, you know, like my church this year, we needed a roof. And we're like, if we don't get a roof, we're going to, like, it could, what if the water comes through and damages the whole building, right? But, you know, maybe we could pray about ways to spend a little differently.
If you live in the Northwest like I do, and your church building, the heater breaks, if you don't put a new heater in, people will freeze in the church and won't be able to come.
I'll tell you what happens. If the heater breaks, all your old people die, then you lose all your money anyway.
Wow.
I'm sorry to say. Did I really?
Anyway.
Just kidding, you guys. I'm totally kidding. But it's true. But there's a balance in all things.
Yeah.
We have to take care of the people we have, but then also be careful not to go too far in one direction, I think.
Right.
Too much of anything, I think, could be a problem.
Well, and there's a difference between putting money into things for your building that are practical and putting money into things for your building that are superficial.
Yeah.
Right?
You rebrand and you're like, the outside of my church, it's the wrong color.
It doesn't fit our aesthetic anymore.
Yeah.
I just really think this is such positive news. It's really uplifting to hear, and it just makes me think about all that we could truly get done with God when we stop fighting with each other and we work together.
Imagine that.
Imagine unity.
But, and at the end of the day, when we, again, especially during COVID time where not a lot of us are really great financially, or before that, it's just, at the end of the day, those numbers don't matter. What matters is the faith. It's faith, not dollars, that paid those debts.
Yeah.
And keeping that in mind, I think we can do big things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's really, really, really positive news. Really exciting. Another piece of exciting, but kind of not complicated but exciting news is that this is another episode that Jordan and I are actually filming together in person. We're in the same room.
So, fun fact, I was not supposed to still be here. I actually had my wedding anniversary on, was that Tuesday? I don't want to say was that Tuesday. I know the date. It's been so crazy. But, and I got it, I was supposed to fly out the next day. And then I got a notification from my airline saying, hey, it's too smoky. We're shutting it down. And
while you were at dinner. During your anniversary, yeah.
And it was really not fair to be like, we're canceling your flight, but we're not going to tell you what's going to happen. I'm like, okay, well, am I going to rent a car and drive home? But, I ended up getting a couple extra days. And so I'm actually flying out tomorrow now instead of Wednesday. But that really got us thinking because we're like, first of all, if we try to record a podcast distance wise again, it's going to be sketchy because we have no time. I'm still here. So we're like, duh, obviously.
If he doesn't get home until late tomorrow.
Yeah. And it's Saturday. Then I work all day Sunday. So anyway, we're like, well, actually my wife was like, duh, you guys should just record one more time. You did really good. Yes. It was cool. So here we are. But, that got us thinking. We're like, okay, we're going to record again, but what are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
And I mentioned last week I was slowly actually dying, and I, for the first time as an adult, started treating my asthma again, and because that was affecting. And then even some people were talking, mentioning to you, Maddie, that you sounded maybe like an old smoker or something.
I had people asking me after last week's episode, had you been crying or are you sick? Do you have a sore throat? If my voice or Jordan's voice sounded a little bit weird last week or sounds a little bit weird this week, it is because the smoke here has been really bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it was close to 500 AQI.
Oh, yeah.
And super, super thick. When you stepped outside, it was honestly like being in a cloud of smoke. It wasn't just laying up in the sky. It was all surrounding. And so I think it was hitting both of us physically in terms of just, my eyes have been burning and my throat's been a little wonky. My typically raspy voice is now quite a bit raspier.
But yeah, and so here we are. I said that even funny. I was like, here we are.
the puberty voice crack.
The more I start to go, and if I laugh and it turns into a wheeze, you'll know it's time for me to take another puff of my new albuterol, right?
Yeah, my brother Tom's been commenting that my laugh is weird now since the smoke, so...
I kind of like it.
Yeah.
It's quirky. It adds a new dynamic to you.
Adds some character, but it is really good to be able to record in person. It's so much more dynamic, I think, and it's really, really fun, and I'm just excited for any future opportunities we may have to do this as opposed to by distance.
And I think the smoke's going to my head too because I meant to actually say what we're talking about and I went right over it. So that being said,
I kind of interrupted you.
That's fine. It happens. We have it's so much more free flowy in the same room. It's nice. But so we were thinking about the smoke, and we were thinking about how a lot of people seem to say it's global warming. Other people say it's not, and so
climate fires is what our governor is calling it.
Yeah, and so.
Just for all of you that are listening, he just gestured to me.
We're going to leave this in.
He goes, and just kind of points.
I have a really bad problem of making an outline and not sticking to it. Maybe it's the pastor in me, like, making an outline for a sermon and just like, oh, God, led me another way.
But you guys, that is actually, you should be happy that we do it that way, because we put a lot of prayer into what we talk about each week.
For sure.
And when we film the podcasts, or... I always say film, but we're not on video. When we record the podcasts, we're very intentional about leaving that space for the Holy Spirit to move. That if we're talking about something and the Holy Spirit directs either of us to not say something we'd planned to talk about or say something we hadn't planned to say, we leave that space, because we think it's so important, because we do consider this like a ministry, and something that we both really feel, not just that we thought it would be cool. Obviously it's cool and it's fun and it's a kind of cool thing to do, but we do think of it as something that the Lord has called both of us to do. So we want to let you know that even though we like to have fun and joke, we do take it really seriously.
Yeah. And we take it, I feel like, seriously in another area where I really don't like to polish and cut up what we talk about. And like we could have cut that entire section out and just went right in. Yeah. Because what I did was I started reading the part Maddie was going to read, and I was like, and so Maddie, go.
And I have bad peripheral vision, so I didn't see him gesturing at me until his hand was pretty much right in front of my face.
Oh yeah, yeah. So anyway, I'm going to give this to you, Maddie.
Anyway,
what are we talking about?
Today Jordan and I want to talk about how Christians approach creation care and how Christians think about and treat the environment.
Oh.
Yeah. So Jordan, hot topic question. Do you consider yourself an environmentalist?
Oh boy, I was hoping not to talk about myself on here
And I asked you first thing. I told you I was going to ask you this.
Well, here's the thing. I definitely do not consider myself an environmentalist. Literally only really start thinking about it, like I said, this trip up here, right? And
when the smoke almost killed you,
Yeah, I will do my best to put the plastic in the recycling bin, but I started reading. I noticed on the Washington recycling cans it says like it has to be like clean plastic, and all this, and I was like, and just like still threw away my soda cup. I realized it's not clean, so someone's gonna come get me. I'm gonna get pulled off my plane for.
You're gonna get arrested.
But yeah, I just it's not something I've really thought about. And I think that I think I represent a lot of other people too. Mm-hmm. We don't think about it until it bursts up into flames, sometimes literally, right?
Yeah.
Well, what about you, Maddie?
Yeah, so yet another way that Jordan and I are pretty different in terms of views. Jordan's kind of like, I never really thought about the environment. And even though both of us were born and raised in Northern California, I'm more of that typical Northern California crunchy granola girl. You like that description?
Yeah.
I mean, it's accurate.
Yeah, and I'm just like, when I go shooting, I try to pick up my shell casings from the ground. Wow. That's my environmentalism.
No comment.
But no, I definitely have been, especially this year, trying to get out more and like go into nature. And like, I think we talked about last week about, realizing God's creation and stuff. And so I've been kind of like striding that direction. But it definitely, if you're anything like me, it seems to be the last thing on people's minds for the most part. We're definitely a consumer culture, and that doesn't really always line up with environmentalism.
No, not at all. When we're always looking for the next best thing, when we're always looking for that hot new thing, that new item,
right,
it doesn't really go along well with practices typically associated with environmentalism. I want to say firstly that this conversation is not about whether or not man-made global warming exists. Yeah. Because this is talking specifically from a Christian perspective. And if you're a Christian, it doesn't matter if you believe in man-made global warming, if you believe that it is just a natural cycle that God has created, that the earth goes through, if you believe it's something else entirely. This really has nothing to do with your views on that, with your view of why the earth's temperature appears to be rising. What really matters is the fact that as Christians, we are called to be stewards of creation and stewards of the earth. And whether you believe in climate change being man-made or not, as a Christian, you're called to be a steward of the earth.
That's right. And it really doesn't have to be such a polarizing issue.
Right.
I feel like even just within Christians, it's there. We can agree that God gave us a gift, right? And we should probably take care of it. And actually, this all kind of got me thinking because I've had. It was about a year ago now. I was able to buy my first new car. And it's not that I wanted a new car. That's just the way God had it and whatever. I got a great deal. But I was always burdened by like the fact that if I didn't have it completely clean all the time, because I'm like, man, I'm not respecting this gift that God gave me.
Yeah.
And it was easier because it was like a small thing that I see all the time. Like we don't zoom out and think of the earth that way. But is it not the same thing? It bummed me out if I realized I left my coffee cup or something in there, or if I went too long without washing my car, but it didn't line up with my the way I should be thinking about the same with the earth. Like it should bum me out in the same way that this bigger gift I got isn't being treated well.
Well, right, because something that is unfortunate is that we think that we are owners of the earth. We think about it as something that we own, when in actuality it's something that we are called to steward. And if you're called to steward something, it means that it belongs to somebody else, but they're putting it in your care, because the earth and everything in it belongs to God, and he has asked humankind to take care of it.
It's pretty simple, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if God asks you to take care of something, I don't know about you, but I think we should do it.
I mean, bring it in. Like, if your significant other says, hey, can you take out the trash? You're just going to do it, right? You're not going to wonder. You're not going to think much about it or go and mow the lawn. You just do it.
Wouldn't know. Hashtag can't relate.
Hashtag find Maddie a husband.
2020. One good thing in 2020.
Yes.
I think a lot of this stems from the fact that we as Christians associate creation care and environmentalism with creation worship. Like things that have to do with pantheism. We associate it with New Age and New Age ideology.
Yeah.
And with particular political views. If you're a Christian that is a Republican or a Christian that identifies as conservative, it's very easy to think, I can't be into creation care, be into creation stewardship, be into environmentalism, because that's only something that is for people that are leftists or people that are registered Democrat or people that are in the Green Party, And that's an incorrect association, because the New Age doesn't own the earth. The earth doesn't belong to the New Age. The earth doesn't belong to the pantheists. The earth doesn't belong to Democrats or Republicans, leftist or conservative. As I said just a few moments ago, the earth and everything in it belongs to God. Period.
Yeah. It's pretty simple, I think, and so when I look back at these fires, I'm not going to go into a big political thing, but I will say most of y'all can probably deduct or deduce what party I lean towards with some of my comments.
If you can see the look
hobbies.
I was giving him right now.
But all that to say, I do see we do a lot of blaming. We just want to put it like, boom, science says it's global warming. But let's be real. When you go right over the border into Canada, there's not as many fires. So all that to say, I'm not going to get into some big old thing on that. But I just want to say maybe it's less of a global warming issue and maybe it's more of a stewardship issue.
Tell me more about that.
There's a lot of, in the terms of like forestry science and stuff, there's other states and other places that say, hey, we need to reduce the amount of foliage in these forests. We need to do controlled burns. Basically pull out the weeds to allow the flowers to grow, right? There's, not all things that grow on Earth are great, right? There's bad weeds and things. But there's also highly flammable little bushes and things like that, I've seen. We have this big push to like stop logging and stop like cutting down all the trees, but it's in the same way of hunting, of like if people didn't hunt deer, for example, they might get overpopulated and starve to death. So it's in the same way, if we don't cut down any of the trees, they're going to starve themselves out, if you think of it that way. And we have these issues. And sure, wherever you sit with global warming, that's not helping.
Right. Either way, whether you believe it's man-made or not, we do know that we're either existing within a very uncomfortable time in a natural cycle, or we're existing within a time where things are heading in an upward direction with no hope of coming down. But either way, we have to learn how to best steward right now in this difficult situation.
Right. And we know that, for example, things are in a constant state of decay, right? Like,
of course,
no matter what, my car is going to eventually break down and whatever. But like, so that being said, should I just allow it to happen, or are there preventative things I can do to help it go along? Like, we understand that for the world. So like, going back to my car, if I know if I maintain the wax on the outside, that my paint won't fade as quickly, right? Or I won't scratch, and if I change the oil, it's going to last longer. So why can't we have like again, like I said, stop with the big polarizing, this party says this, that party says that. Can't we just agree that maybe we could do a little bit of maintenance, a little bit of tending to God's garden of sorts, to make it a little bit prettier, to make it a little bit safer, and maybe have a little bit less, not to end the wildfires because that's natural, but to maybe reduce it a little bit.
Absolutely. The Bible really does have a lot to say about creation. In Genesis, we see that when God created the world, he said that it was good. And just like I brought up last week, Paul tells us in Romans that creation serves as the first witness. We see creation as a constant theme throughout the Bible. We see that the Bible, of course, we know is the story of the creation, the fall, and redemption of humankind. But that parallels the creation, the fall, and redemption of the natural world. And it's not something we often talk about, but we do see that in so many of the most important aspects of Scripture and in so many of the most critical events, the natural world plays a very important role. We see this in the Noahic flood. We see this in the wilderness accounts of Jesus and the wilderness accounts of the Israelites. We see this in a lot of the prophetic texts. We see it in Revelation. We see it all throughout Scripture. And I think it's very interesting and very important that you did bring up the topic of stewardship, and really bad stewardship possibly being a reason for these wildfires. In Genesis 1:28, we see humankind's first call to stewardship. It says, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves on the earth. I think that when we imagine creation as just something for us to use and for something that we have to consume, that's not glorifying to God. We have to view it as something beautiful that God created and that he wants us to take care of, that he's trusted us to take care of. That's a privilege. If you have something that you've made, that you treasure, that you say is good and that you love, it's a privilege to ask someone else to take care of that for you.
Yeah.
It's a real showing of that you trust that person. Psalm 95, 3-5 says, for the Lord is a great God and a great King above all gods. In his hand are the deep places of the earth. The heights of the mountains are also his. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord, our Maker. And with that, I'd love to throw things back to you, Jordan, and ask kind of what your experience has been in the church with creation care and environmentalism, and in terms of the Christians that you've been around, what would you say are kind of the things that you've heard or the primary views that you've been exposed to?
Yeah, well, zooming out of that even, I feel like we're really bad communicators, right? Like, there's a lot of arguments that don't have to be just simply because we miscommunicated and we kind of just left it at that. I unfortunately, when we talk about like, I can mirror exactly what I see in the world as in the church. We have a lot of more liberal Christians that are going to say, we should protect the earth and we should, be great with this and that, whatever. But then we see a lot of conservative Christians, which are a little bit louder right now, I think, and saying, oh, global warming is fake, it's this and that. They've again brought back the god of politics. There's another episode eventually. But rather than talking particularly about this issue of creation care, of stewardship, of whether or not global warming is real, whatever, zooming out and just talking about our communication strategies, that's something I'm really into. And so, the first off, I have three little things. First off, make sure you treat your conversations as dialogue. Don't ever, and this is great, especially if you guys are into apologetics and like, you want to try to like convert people or whatever, but don't ever enter a conversation just waiting for them to finish talking so you can give your point, or with the idea that you're just going to win them over or that you're going to out argue them. No, like, just treat it as a neutral dialogue, because like there's a scholar, Richard Johannesson, he asserts that audience members can tell when a speaker sees them as equal, inferior, or superior. So wow. People can read that on you. So if you enter a conversation with anything other than like, hey, let's have a dialogue, people are going to be able to tell that, and their guard could already be up and you've lost. Your goal should never be to offend, and the minute you do, you're done. And so going on from there, try to locate a common value. There's a lot of things you might disagree with people, but there's also going to be something you agree on. Like, try to find some neutral ground, some things that you guys can both be like, yeah, you know what, we agree on this. To kind of, again, level that playing field and bring in that just a talk and not a argument. And I'm trying to go kind of quick just because I don't want to like over talk about this stuff. But and the last thing is, and I actually pulled this from an article, but avoid relying on science. Evidence that, when you throw evidence and numbers at people, it can strengthen an argument, but some studies have shown that people largely change their views on climate change due to what the science says, but other studies have found that this is not always true. And in some cases, exposure to scientific facts actually cause people to double down on their previous held beliefs in something known as the boomerang effect. Accordingly, so, with that being
That's
said...
really interesting.
Right? Like, you would never think that, right? But so that being said, I really would encourage people not to rely solely on science or on just what you consider cold hard facts in a climate conversation, or really in any conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are all really great tips for having some conversations surrounding climate change and creation care and environmentalism. And I think something you said that was really important was finding a common value. And as Christians, if we look at the scripture, our common value should be that creation is a beautiful thing. Creation is something that the Lord has made and has asked humankind to steward. Yes, you may completely disagree on matters of the cause of the climate change we're dealing with right now. Is it man-made, or is it just some natural cycle that the earth goes through? But the common value is what the scripture tells us.
Right.
I think it's really important, and I'd be interested in kind of how you're feeling on this as well, is it's important that we view creation as something that is being redeemed and that has been redeemed, instead of something to be destroyed. And I think that this has a lot to do, actually, interestingly enough, with our eschatology.
Oh, okay.
The most prevalent eschatological view in evangelicalism today is the premillennial dispensational view, which is really kind of that left behind view. And with that view really comes an understanding that everything's going to hell in a handbasket, and it's all going to go up in flames anyway, and it's going to be what it's going to be, and I'm going to get raptured and pop right out of here and say, peace, I'm out. And unfortunately, when we do that, we view creation, this beautiful gift, as something that's going to be destroyed instead of something to be redeemed. Because God's the redemptive work of Jesus Christ on the cross was not just for humankind, but for all of creation. In Colossians 1:20, the Apostle Paul says, "For it pleased the Father that in him all fullness should dwell, and to reconcile all things to himself by him, having made peace through the blood of his cross. By him I say, whether they are things in heaven or things on earth." So this redemptive work was not just something that was purely spiritual, but it's also something that's physical. And it's something that we see that in the end, we're not just going to be, suspended, floating, soul, ghost-looking things, riding on our clouds with our little halos. In the end, when Jesus does come back and all is made right, and the kingdom of God is here in its complete fullness, the full revelation of that, we're going to be living in a new creation. We're not going to be living in some spirit realm. We're going to be living on earth. Here. Yeah. And so when you think about that, it really changes your perspective about creation. But because the primary eschatological view is premillennial dispensationalism, I think that has impacted a lot of what conservative evangelicals, what they feel about creation care and creation stewardship and environmentalism in general.
Yeah, and I think in general, I'm guilty of it too. We kind of stop thinking past death, right?
That's true.
And we just think the earth is here, but like you're saying, the earth is going to be here after we die, and when we have a new kingdom. And like you said, we're not just going to be these little spirit beings. We actually have a kingdom to rule over with Jesus, right? And so, that being said, right now, is the earth you're living on right now, or your neighborhood, is that something you consider appropriate for your kingdom?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And when I look at this, it's interesting because it really is revelatory of a bigger issue. And N.T. Wright actually has a lot to say about this, which is that today, especially within Western, particularly North American evangelicalism, we view heaven as the goal. Whereas in the New Testament, the goal was, of course, the ultimate goal is always Christ.
Yeah.
But in terms of what happens after we die, the hope was not heaven. The hope was the resurrection, the new redeemed creation. So we have a completely different mindset than the early church, than the New Testament believers. And it's something to think about. We also have to think that in the New Testament, they were extremely connected to the natural world because it was what the means by which God used to sustain them. Yeah. That they were fishermen and they were farmers and they lived off of the land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and going back to it for myself, I try to be, as much as I give opinions and I talk about other people, I really try to be introspective. But I just think me personally, I don't want to destroy one of the things that helps me remember that God's a thing. And that sounds funny, but one, like I shared last week in how to connect with God, one thing for me personally was being in nature and seeing his creation. And so I just can't imagine if that wasn't there. God's still here. He's bigger than all of this and he exists out of all of it. But if I'm, that's just it. It's kind of funny, but
even if we have to move to a colony on Mars,
right? He created that too. But in a selfish way, man, I don't want to give up those reminders I have that God is great.
Absolutely.
And so, in this time, and where I'm at in this week or the season, whatever you want to call it, is maybe I would love to figure out some actual ways and tangible ways I can be better. And I gave some ideas about, in terms of within the church, how we can handle it, because I feel my heart with that was yes, there's an issue here, but there's also that can cause division if we're just going to fight about it.
How do we have healthy communication about this issue?
So that's kind of where I go. But, Maddie, you have some more actual practical things particular to stewarding and being a good steward of creation care. And so I'd love to just jump into that because you've got a whole lot of good things.
Yeah, we're really into practical application on the Church Vibes podcast.
Definitely.
So I'm going to share just some practical tips for how you can practice creation care in your own life. And if Jordan has any questions or clarifications on behalf of the audience, he will make those. So my first thing is to remember that there are 2 R's before recycle. We always hone in on the recycle. We say, oh, well, I recycle. I put this in the recycling bin.
I even said that.
You're like, I recycle my plastic. But there's 2 R's that come before recycle, which are reduce and reuse.
Yeah.
Which means that the first thing that we should be doing is trying to reduce what we use. And the second thing we should be doing is trying to reuse. And then we recycle that which we haven't been able to reduce or that which we can no longer reuse.
Yeah.
So focus on trying to reduce and trying to reuse. Those are things that are often forgotten, but they're very important. Going off of a similar thought process is to buy used when possible. Because not only is this a matter of creation stewardship, this is also a matter of financial stewardship.
Right.
How are you using the money, God's money, that He's given to you and told you to steward and take care of? Are you being wise with where you spend it and how much you spend on things? Are you going off and only buying brand new shiny items when you could be buying used items? When we buy used items, it is really helpful in terms of reducing waste, and really goes to the point of we are still in that second step of reuse. It may be new to us, but we're reusing something that somebody else has already used.
Yeah, and I've been big into thrifting, and that's one thing. Like, I go to some more affluent areas in the thrift stores. I cannot believe what people will essentially throw away.
Just give away, yeah.
Matter of fact, I made money on it by reselling. Like, I'm like, these shoes are brand new, man.
Getting that coin.
But then, also on that too, when I was trying to get let's call it my first like big boy winter coat, right? Because instead of just going and buying whatever, I went and I'm like, okay, what brand should I get? And I ended up with Patagonia, simply because if you like tear your jacket or your article of clothing, they'll fix it.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And so I think with that, like, I think we can encourage listeners too to maybe when you make a purchase, see maybe they have some program to help that along.
Yeah. Something that's more of an investment.
Right. Yeah. And something that isn't going to be something you throw away and then Jordan finds later at Goodwill.
And sells. Sells for profit. Yeah. I think that's super important. Really great. And one thing that is an added benefit is that a lot of thrift stores are actually nonprofit organizations.
Right, yeah.
I know, for instance, in my town, there are thrift stores that are benefiting homes for people with disabilities. There are thrift stores that benefit people who are struggling with cancer. There are ones that benefit homeless people. So you're giving your money to a charitable organization.
Yeah,
which is
awesome.
Another added benefit. So really all around.
You're doing double good.
That's
like
good.
such a
Thrifting
non-scholarly answer, but you're doing double good.
Double good. Or we could say doubly well.
Doubly well, yes.
One thing that is often overlooked in terms of taking care of the earth is switching over to more natural products, because when we use products that are filled with chemicals, those chemicals are leaching into our water, they're leaching into our soil. Yeah. And of course, a lot of people know that those products are affecting your health, but they don't realize that they're also impacting the health of the earth itself. So looking to find natural cleaning products, natural body care products, makeup, etc. And because natural products are becoming a bit more mainstream, there are actually a lot of affordable options. And particularly in terms of cleaning products and body care products, there are a lot of things that you can do to very easily and extremely affordably DIY them, make them yourself.
Yeah, that's really big right now, right?
Yeah, DIY is very in during the coronavirus.
Definitely.
People are like, I can't find things that I need and I'm really bored. So why don't I just try to make my own lotion and see what happens? So try to do that. Nobody's perfect, and you never want to feel that pressure of, I'm personally responsible for the environment being fixed, because obviously every single person has a small amount of responsibility. And then of course we look at the large corporations and the fact that a lot of them are not necessarily doing what they should be doing, but that is a topic for another time. But yeah, looking at finding products that don't contain those chemicals. And in the same line, trying, when possible, it's not always feasible, to find products that are farmed organically, so they're not putting all of the chemicals and things into the soil. That's really important. I would say also buying local
definitely
is huge. And there are so many benefits to that. Number one is oftentimes in terms of organic products or products that are natural, buying things that are local is typically a lot more cost effective than buying organic products just from the grocery store or online or things like that. Number two, you're again benefiting local business owners. You're helping people out in your community. So that's another way of just stewarding the time and talents and treasures that the Lord's bestowed upon us. And with local products, they also don't have to travel as far to get to you. And so we don't have there's a lot less emissions associated with that.
I've never thought about that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I know. I mean, think about how far does so many of the things that we enjoy, how far did they have to travel to get to us?
We think we order on Amazon. Mm-hmm. And in 2 days, it's magically at our door, right? But there's a lot more to it.
Mm-hmm. The Amazon ferries.
And it definitely took energy.
Exactly. Which leads me to my next point, which is just being cognizant of your consumption. Especially now when everybody is at home. Be cognizant of how much energy you're using, how much water you're using. Are you constantly leaving the lights on in the middle of the day? Mm-hmm. Are you letting the water run? Which, I'll be honest, I'm not a perfect person. I definitely struggle with, not letting the water run for too long to heat up before my shower or leaving the water on when I brush my teeth. Nobody is perfect. So I think that's important to say, but just be cognizant, be aware of how much energy you're actually using. How many times do you really need to drive to the store today? How many times do you really need to turn the faucet on to rinse something out? Or how many times do you need to flip the light switches on and off? How many TVs do you have to have on,
Right. And if you're more towards my end of the spectrum where you're like, yeah. If you think of it this way too, that's especially so when I recently moved into a new place and they started charging me water. So I didn't have to pay for water before. You legitimately are saving money, right?
Right. And so, more financial
stewardship at the very least. Just tell yourself that, and you also happen to be helping the earth too, and that's all awesome.
Exactly. It's a win-win situation.
Definitely.
My final point, and it's something that we've really touched on a lot, and we touched on last week, and it's something that you'll probably be hearing from me a lot because it's something that I'm writing my master's thesis on it, which is spend time in nature. Not only is that spiritually formative, but it's going to help you to learn to genuinely appreciate this gift, to genuinely appreciate this beautiful thing that God has made, this thing that God declared as good. And when you do that, for people that do feel like they don't necessarily have the motivation to reduce, reuse, recycle, switch to natural products, make the small changes that they can, that motivation often comes when we learn to appreciate nature. When we spend time in nature, our mindset can really shift. So it's something that is spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically formative. And it's really of the utmost importance.
Yeah, I kind of imagine literally the more you spend time in nature, the more you notice when people drop trash in the trail.
Yeah,
I've been big on that, and you're like, are you kidding me? And then you even start changing your mindset there.
Yeah.
You're like, I remember when I was little, we would try to pack out trash even, when you go to the beach or whatever. Just stuff like that. And that's been big for me when you said spend time in nature, because like I said, I've been trying to do that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, listen to this person, you guys.
So I think I'm going to take us right into our final thoughts. Since I've been Miss Chatty Cathy today, I think I will just keep on charging ahead and give my final thoughts, which is this: the earth is a beautiful gift. It reflects the glory of God and serves as the first witness for the gospel of Jesus Christ. The earth and everything in it belongs to Him. So let's take the politics out of it. Let's take the partisanship out of it. Let's stop being ignorant, and let's just learn to steward what the Lord has so graciously placed in our care.
Right, and you don't have to be one political leaning, left or right, whatever, to care about the earth, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we're Christians and we've been given this gift. And so it's really not that crazy to try to maybe rethink a few things, take one of the steps we talked about, and apply it. Let's just take care of the gift God gave us and see where that takes us. Simple
Absolutely.
as that.
Simple as that. You've said that like 5 times, it's just so simple. It's as simple as that. And it really is.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
I think that preaches to myself because I'm a natural overthinker. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just like, oh, it really is that simple.
It really is that simple. So for all of you listening, Jordan thinks it's simple. I think it's simple. It's simple. So with that, it's time to say goodbye. So until next week, abide in Christ, love your neighbor, and never stop having the tough conversations.
Love you guys.
Peace.